And welcome to the Business Desk. We start here this evening. President Cyril Ramaphosa, as we heard last night, has announced a raft of interventions in an effort to deal with the power crisis. Apart from the national state of disaster, the president introduced rebates for those who will be using solar power. But how is this all going to work? We're joined by energy expert and CEO at Phakwe Group, Thabiso Tenyane, as we continue giving you reaction from all quarters from the reaction from the State of the Nation address. Thabiso, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Colin.
Thabiso, I want to start by getting your reaction, your initial reaction before we get into the nitty-gritties of what the president announced. What did you make of this year's State of the Nation address?
Yeah, I think before the State of the Nation address, we heard about the anticipation of the national disaster on energy crisis. And that we expected, but we didn't expect further the details as to how he wants to go about in appointing also the Minister of Electricity. I even was tempted to say, I'm accepting the job without being paid a salary in order to play a role in the country. But what is now a situation, and now interchangeably, we use the word energy crisis, then we use the word electricity crisis, and I think as a country we need to come to terms with what is this crisis. Electricity is part of the energy sector as in its own entirety. So we need to break it down. And I think much as we welcome the approach the president needs to take, I feel that the root cause of this load shedding or electricity crisis or energy crisis, it is rooted in indecision. There is lack of decision. There is lack of inconsistency by the number of administrations that comes in. There is lack of coordination, and there is lack of bold decision as to what is it that we need to do. So for me we have a leadership crisis and we have a state of paralysis that is with us. So we will really want to see as to whether is there any other regulations we can put that would then enable us to deal with it. Let me demonstrate what I'm saying by lack of leadership. In 2007, March, the cabinet then and the ESCOM board took a decision that we are boosting the capacity of the country to 80 megawatt by 2025. And the following year, that decision was shelved. Remember, we wanted to build nuclear, 20 giga of nuclear, which was going to be 25% of the capacity that we needed as a country. That was shelved by the same government, by the way. So today, we then, and that time, the starting point was going to be 4 giga, which was going to cost us for $12 billion. At the time, it means we're going to spend 75 billion on a rand dollar basis. If we are to proceed with 4 billion of nuclear today, it will cost us probably 240 billion. So the inconsistency in implementing the decisions that we ourselves have made needs to stop. Let me demonstrate again. We discussed ISMO 2010. We shelved it because at the time ESCOM was about to then embark in building Medupi and Kosile. Today, if we take a decision in implementing ISMO, Medupi and Kosile won't qualify because it will be expensive on the basis of the overrun cost that they have spent. So that tariff won't qualify on an auction and on the market. Let me demonstrate further. The Mineral Petroleum Resources Developmental Plan, 2012, we then said, if we are to be moving to gas, we need to determine who's going to hold the stake from a government perspective. 2023, we have that bill not being finalized. Where are we going as a country? Before we then declare ourselves to say we want to accelerate ourselves, we need to be clear as to the path that we need to take. What ends load shedding, it is not the maintenance of Eskom's power stations. What will end load shedding is the building of new plants that are going to be taking us to 2050, 2063. Because, I hope you remember, Tony, I'm not sure how old you are. In my days when I grew up, there used to be Super 10s and E20s in terms of taxis. Do you still see some of them? Yes, maybe you still see some of them. Very slow, they are struggling to drive. You can fix that car for as long as you want to fix it. Eskom this year is 100 years, I've been emphasizing. So to then want to bring in those Super 10s and E20s back again into the road, you are going to create as many breakdowns, as many accidents and congestion. It is time. If you can read the budget vote of Minister of Energy in 2018, he says this is the year of bold steps, and he outlined exactly the decisions that needed to be taken. None of those things have been done. There is inconsistency, and therefore then, this leadership issue, no matter what state of the disaster we are declaring, if we don't get the right people for the right positions that understand the nature of the problem that we are experiencing, we're going to find ourselves by 2030 in the same situation. Let me also further say, do you know that 1994, the Minister of Energy was Phakwe then. To date, we then had 13 more ministers in energy. To date. In Eskom, from 1985 to 2007, we had only 3 CEOs in 22 years. 2007 to date, we have 13 CEOs. Which culture must those employees follow? Which plan needs to be followed? Because every 1.5 years, if not a year, I think Andre is going to, in record time, then register to be the longest serving CEO probably for that 3 years he was there.
Absolutely. Thabiso, I want to engage you on the other measures that have been introduced. Now, bringing in more renewables, there's going to be tax incentives for business and private individuals. You are in that energy space. Who is it going to benefit the most? Obviously, there is going to be these tax incentives for businesses. The bounce back scheme is also being used for businesses to actually apply for solar finance. What do you make of that particular plan, which is particularly a new plan?
Look, we welcome it. Too late. But at the same time, let me explain the connection of solar panels to any house or to any business. That is what we refer to as behind the meter connection. What it means is who and what structure are we putting as a country to monitor the rollout of that? Because if we're not monitoring that, then people then buy this solar. I don't know tomorrow. You are now fed up with load shedding. You are then deciding that you have some money that you are going to spend to put your geyser on solar and maybe some of the appliances that you're thinking can be able to be, depending on the load that is. Eskom and the municipality don't see that because we call it behind the meter. Therefore then, as we continue, one of the challenges that we need to appreciate is what it means to be 85% relying on coal. Is because once Eskom has put the coal in the fire station, it has put the coal. So it will send it to where it is expected to be. So, Johannesburg, in an actual fact today, the city of Tshwane was saying, I am taking bulk electricity from Eskom. By the time month end comes, I need to then pay Eskom. The consumption doesn't match the bulk that I have taken because it is compounded by those connections that they are talking about. It is compounded by a culture of non-payment. And therefore then, because of lack of storage, we have missed that. So the problem is still going to continue. So that is something that, yes, we need to migrate ourselves to it. Before we talk about tax incentives, the banks have already moved in that particular space and saying, if you have the bond with me and you really want to then connect renewable on top of your house, please come, I will extend some on the basis of the equity you have in your bond. I will then extend and finance you in order to connect. Yes, what does that do? Yes, it will probably reduce a bit of demand so that then we are starting to plan the load shedding in a much more clear way. But that is a solution that an ordinary individual from Alexander is never going to be in a position to actually respond to that, even if that person is an SMME. So to implement that, it will help, and I'm not saying, but to put systems in place in order to monitor and implement it in the right way is something that it's going to take probably 5 years from now.
Thabiso, Tenyane, thank you very much for your time. A lot of questions still remain, as you hear from the energy expert there and CEO at Phakwe Group, Thabiso Tenyane, giving us his insights into what to make of the President's interventions that were announced last night at the State of the Nation Address 2023.